I invite you to open our service by singing our opening song this morning, number 157, Step by Step, the Longest March.
Good morning. Welcome to UCOV, which stands for Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Venice. UCOV strives to be a beacon of liberal religion for Florida's Sun Coast and a refuge for all who seek a welcoming community, regardless of your color, creed, ability, or class, no matter who you love, your gender expression, political affiliation, or religious beliefs. We celebrate our differences as we learn from one another. I'm Janet Knudsen. I serve on UCOV's Interim Minister Search Committee and Community Outreach. If you'd like to know more about UCOV and its many opportunities for learning, growth, and connection, please see our calendar and announcements on Facebook or on our web page, which is ucov.org, or stop by our welcome table on the lanai. We're very glad you've chosen to join us today, and we hope you find something in this service that speaks to you. Are there any first-time visitors here today who would like to introduce themselves and tell us where you're from? Yes?
Hi, Alita Boyle from Belgrade, Maine.
Belgrade, Maine. There's always a little murmur after. Anybody else who's new to us? Yes.
My sister's shy, but she's from up near Rochester, New York, and Webster, and her name is Marilyn.
Welcome. Anybody else to introduce themselves? Anyone who's recently returned from being somewhere else that wants us to welcome them back? No? Okay. Today we have a special offering. It's for All Faiths Food Bank. Nearly 40% of households in Sarasota struggle to afford their basic needs. All Faiths Food Bank is the largest hunger relief organization in Sarasota County. It provides millions of meals each year and is rated 4 stars by Charity Navigator. For every $1 you give, the food bank can purchase 5 meals. And because UCOV will pass these donations through the Flanzer Family Trust, your gift today will be doubled. Please make any checks payable to UCOV and write All Faiths in the memo line. If you're attending this service online today, please consider navigating to our website and clicking on the donate button. Thank you all for your generosity. While the ushers are passing the basket, I'm going to tell you about some upcoming events. But first we have an important item that has gone missing. If anybody knows where the guest book went, this was the guest book that we had at Kleber's launch party, and then it was on the lanai here at church for his last service, and it has gone missing. So if anyone has any idea what happened to that guest book, please let Pam Palmer know. Anyone who is wondering about adult religious education, it is undergoing some changes and will be back soon. Tomorrow, it's February 14th. What day is that? Valentine's Day. case any of you have forgotten, you've gotten your reminder. So tomorrow, 9 a.m., the walking group will meet at Carlton Reserve off Border Road. And in Waters Hall from 1 to 4 will be the Arts and Crafts group. On Tuesday, the Social Justice team will host an open meeting at 2 o'clock. You can join it at Waters Hall or via Zoom. So please come and share your ideas for furthering UCOV's mission as a caring community in pursuit of justice. Wednesday at 1:30, Waters Hall will be Socrates Cafe. It says this is a dual platform meeting. I think that means you can join it in person or via Zoom. Thursday will be choir rehearsal at 4 o'clock. Friday, membership committee will host an open meeting. And this will be in the Waters Hall, Lanai. And this is for people who have some ideas to help us grow as a community and help us to be welcoming to visitors. Soon we will be starting groups that are focused on evolving your spiritual practice. Please talk to Kathy Avery if you are interested in this or want to learn more about what that is. February 22nd, that's a week from Tuesday, we have an exciting event happening right here in the sanctuary at 4 o'clock. It's a concert of Broadway music, specifically the music of Stephen Sondheim and Leonard Bernstein. So we hope a lot of you will come out to hear songs from West Side Story, A Little Night Music, Into the Woods, and other great Broadway shows. We have a talented group of singers to perform them for you. And if you want more information, please talk to Dawn Spitz. Is Dawn here today? There's Dawn. And you should also sign up on the Lanai if you're planning to go to this event. They do want to find out how many people are coming. We are so delighted to have Reverend Dennis McCarty back here at UCOV this month, and he will be leading our service today.
I believe we have a few words on this year's pledge campaign.
Sorry about that. February is our pledge month this year, and we're, as far as we're counting, about halfway through. You got 2 more weeks. I would ask you to fill out the pledge form. If you don't have one, at the welcome desk, there's a slip of paper. All else fails, just send Dave Lyon an email with the amount that you wish to pledge. It's going fairly well right now. I think we're on course to meet our objective, but we'll know better in 2 weeks. So I'll give you a rundown. Today we have, I've asked people to give some testimonials, and so we'll start, I guess, with Eileen Leapley, right?
This is important to me. Otherwise, you would have no idea who was speaking. All right. Good morning. My name's Eileen Leapley. I was asked to briefly talk about why UCOV is important to me. I realize now that I have been a lifelong Unitarian, despite the fact I hadn't even heard of the denomination until I was in my 30s. I suspect several of you have had a similar experience. My own family was Catholic, non-practicing, but my mom wanted me to participate, so she sent me to my communion lessons. I was terrified of the nuns that I had to spend time with each week at the local Catholic school. I put a halt to that as soon as I made my first communion in my little bridal dress, and I never made it to my confirmation. I stayed away from religion altogether until I enrolled my children in Grace Methodist Preschool. I thought it would be a good idea for us all to attend church on Sundays. The children would learn values and what it means to be a good person. So, unfortunately, I didn't feel what the other congregants felt on Sundays. I was told that I should ask Jesus to come into my heart, so naively, I asked Jesus to come into my heart, but he never did. But I was a spiritual person. I felt a need to find a place to share my spirituality with others. A friend had told me about Unitarian Universalism, and one day I decided to visit a UU church. So I gathered up my courage, I drove to UCOV, and I was met in the parking lot by a lovely lady named Nancy Ryder. She invited me, a complete stranger, to have lunch with a group of ladies after the service. I was so appreciative that she welcomed me the way she did, and she made me feel very comfortable. I sat down next to another lovely woman who turned out to be Pat Wellington, who's probably here somewhere. She looked me in the eye in her Pat Wellington way, and she said, "So, what's your story?" I really felt comfortable then. So I sat back and I listened to an enthralling service by Reverend Don Boudreau. I never had a moment's hesitation about being a part of this wonderful faith community. I became a member within a month of visiting. At the time, I didn't realize how important this congregation would be to me. I met my husband, Steve, there, out on the lanai. I met so many other good friends. You have all become a real family to me, as my biological family has beliefs that are so different from my own that we are often on tense terms. When I was asked to head up the caring and remembrance team, I felt like I wasn't up to the job. I'm not organized enough. I won't be able to take care of everyone's needs. Then I realized that I am surrounded by so many caring, loving people at UCOV, and they will always be there when the need arises. I look forward to enjoying my UCOV family for a very long time to come.
Thank you, Eileen. We appreciate that. And now I want to call on Steve. Are you going to say something? Are you? Okay, all right.
I think I'm scheduled. Last word.
Okay,
I think I'm scheduled.
you're scheduled.
How do you follow that? My goodness. Well, all right. I'm Steve Leapley. Most of you know me. I'm your personal Walmart greeter out front, and I also take care of security out there. I've been a member for about 9 years. I've served on your board of trustees for the last almost 3 years. Since I am of Irish descent and have the gift and or curse to tell a story, 9 years ago I had been a widower for over 3 years and had been searching for a place to belong. I had long ago given up any residual effects of 11 years of Catholic school, although I still have the scars, mental and physical, from it. Then I hit the lottery. I found UCOV. I found my wife, Eileen, at the welcome table. On my first visit to UCOV, it was a very welcoming young lady with a terrific smile. 6 months later, she was my wife. I've never regretted it. Although hard to follow her, as I said. By the way, on a footnote to that, subsequently after that, there was a rush of widows signing up for the welcome table. Having been a police lieutenant, I rarely got to see the good side of life. And in fact, it soured me on human beings in general. Here at UCOV, not only I have made wonderful friends, but in everyday interactions with fellow UCOVers, I get to see and experience the good, caring, inclusive fellowship of like-minded individuals and experience spiritual well-being and growth. Thank you very much for taking me into your family.
Thank you, Steve. I wasn't expecting to have both of you speak, but I'm very glad you did. Now I'm going to call on Jerry Moja. If you'll come up. Is Kim coming or just you? Okay, come on, Jerry.
Going over to it. Morning. And thank you for removing the trip hazard. So I'm Jerry Moja, and I'm still wondering how I got here. Last week, my wife and I were sitting up near the front about where the woman in the red sweater was, really minding our own business and waiting for the next steps meeting after the service, or whatever we called it, how it was going to work, how it works meeting. Anyway, when Joel came over to talk to us, and Joel and his wife Bev are wonderful people. Actually, they're wonderful enough that they're very hard to say no to. Anyway, he asked if we'd be willing to talk about the pledge drive, and the next thing I knew, here I am. Anyway, here goes. Early in our relationship, Kim Roden, my wife, and I decided that we wanted to have a church home together. We came upon Unitarian Universalism in the Minneapolis area and became members of our newfound church. Since that time, we have been continuous members of a Unitarian church for 40 plus years. It has been proven to be one of the very best decisions of our lives. We all have our reasons for coming here, whether it be physically or these days through Zoom. Those reasons are personal and important, or we simply wouldn't do it. Alas, having this place, this organization, this church community is not free. It needs financial support, my support, your support, our support. The process that we use for gaining that support is pledging. It is making a financial commitment and writing it down and giving it to the church so that we, the organization, can create a financial plan for the year. We've tried Ouija boards. I've heard they're not very useful. Perhaps you are new to the experience of pledging, or maybe this practice has been a part of your Unitarian Universalist journey for many years. Either way, here are 3 reasons why pledging financial support for your church matters. Pledging empowers identity. A pledge, regardless of the amount, says, I am a part of something larger than myself. It says, I stand with this church community in pursuit of UU principles. When we do the math and sign the card, we are saying, I want to support this congregation with my time, my treasure, and my talents. A pledge says, I believe in what we are doing as a congregation and in who we are becoming together. A pledge card says, yes, we're in. Our board chair's father said, nothing in this life is free except trouble. that struck me as appropriate. Anyway. Second, pledging empowers accountability. Deeply rooted in our 7 principles is the conviction that we exist as a dynamic community of strength and social justice intended to help each other to continually live into and up to our fullest identity and potential. Even with the best of intentions and on our best days, our deep convictions can sometimes be neglected and overlooked. When we pledge, we create for ourselves a mechanism of accountability. We empower our church to empower each other. A pledge makes it possible to walk alongside each other on the journeys, to respectfully encourage each other in the pursuit of our generosity goals. I'll say it again. When we pledge, we empower each other. Pledging empowers the budget. There is a very practical and pragmatic reason for pledging. It is a vital tool in the process of developing and managing a healthy church budget. A church budget is a funding plan that is built with a variety of tools. In our discernment and dialogue, our congregational leaders need your pledge to develop that budget. The vitality and sustainability of the work of this congregation are strengthened with each commitment pledged. This is why my wife and I pledge, and why we are asking for your consideration to join us all and pledge today. If you haven't completed your pledge card and turned it in, please do it today. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to turn this back to Dennis here so that he can say some kind words, but remember, 2 weeks from today, we're done. And so get your pledge in, follow what Jerry just said. We'll gladly take it today. Thank you.
To what has already been said, I will only add as our call to worship, to live our lives fully is itself an act of faith, an investment, and an appreciation. To go forth as though certain, even if we are not certain, that the product of our day will be worth the effort, is to invest in life itself. In so doing, we live into 4 important questions. What do I most want to see happen? What will it take to make that happen? What are my resources? What is my commitment? Let us reflect and celebrate together. We light this beacon of hope as a symbol of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. And I invite you to stand as you're willing and able and join us in singing hymn number 109 as we come marching, marching. You may know the lyrics as Bread and Roses. Be seated. We have a short responsive reading this morning, The Wonder and the Horror. As always, I'll read the straight type, and I invite you to respond with the boldface type. The wonder and the horror are opposite sides to a single coin. Do not shy away from what is real, because the courage to live and love that courage is itself the armor and the physique we most need, our protection and our endurance. We are what we dare to feel. We are whom we dare to love. What we care about is what we become. Since what we choose is what we are, And if the kids will come up, Kathy Avery's going to tell you a story.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, I'm going to tell you a story about being new and how sometimes it's fun and sometimes it ain't. Once there was a second grader named Paul. In September, he moved to a new town, had a new teacher and a new class and a brand new desk. There was a boy sitting across from him with bright red hair. His name was Ryan. He told Paul a knock-knock joke, and he was really funny. So that first day was a good day. The second day, 3 other boys came up to Ryan, and he thought, oh, great, they want to make friends with me too. But that wasn't what happened. They came up and started poking Paul and even calling him names. He looked at his friend Ryan. Ryan didn't really want to hear what was going on. So what do you think he did? What would you do if you didn't want to hear something that was going on? What would you do?
I'd plug my ears.
Say again.
Plug my ears.
You'd plug your ears. Would you guys all plug your ears? No? Well, that's what he did. He stuck his fingers in his ears. The second day was not such a good day. But the next day was even worse. Because the 3 boys came up to Paul at lunchtime and they stole his lunch. He didn't have anything to eat. The next day, Paul didn't come to school at all. The 3 boys were cheering that day because Paul wasn't there. Then, even though he didn't want to, Ryan heard them planning mean things they were going to do to Paul when he came back to school. But this time, he didn't stick his fingers into his ears. What do you think he did?
He listened.
He listened. What did he do after he listened?
Told Paul over the phone or something, because probably second graders have phones at that time, maybe.
Okay, so maybe he called his friend to warn him. Is there another action he could have taken?
He could stop them from bullying him.
By doing what? Besides Paul, who might they tell?
The teacher.
The teacher. Is that what you were going to say? Yeah. So that's what he did. He told the teacher. And when Paul came back to school and there was recess, the 3 boys came around. But then the teacher came around too. And Ryan said, "Come on, play with me." And that was the best day of all, because that day, Paul and Ryan became best friends. And so my hope for all of you this year is when you hear something you'd rather not hear, that you don't stick your fingers in your ears. I hope that when you see someone that needs your help this year, you find a way to support them.
So what are you going to do today?
Have fun and learn something.
These kids are really sharp. Yep. Have fun and learn something. And now we're going to sing. Well, hard to follow that act. This is the time in our service when we share the triumphs and the tribulations in our lives. If you have a celebration to share, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you. And as always, I think we're working on being brief, personal, and non-political.
Yes, I'm celebrating the visit by my brother from Rochester, Michigan. As you can see, some you can see, some you may not see. He's younger, wiser, and some say more handsome.
Well, that's one of the joys of masks, isn't it? Nobody knows. Sorrows. Do we have a sorrow to share this morning? I have a celebration and a sorrow, if you don't already know. I got an email from Dave Lyon. He feels pretty good, but he's still testing positive, so he's still isolating and frustrated, and I don't blame him. But so far, so good.
It's all right. I have a loud voice.
I never seem to get the right side on this.
A year ago, my husband was in the nursing home for almost a year, and somehow someone gave him COVID. So a week later, after not seeing him physically for almost the whole year because of pandemic, they let us in there. They gave us a plastic helmet. That was it, you know. So my youngest daughter, our youngest daughter, came with me, and she gave him some little drips of water, but he really couldn't talk. He was in the thrashing around, you know. So, but he was done. 83 and a half years. He'd struggled for more than 40 years after having a stroke and never went to work again. We had 3 teenagers. We made it. 63 and a half years of marriage. I was just out of high school, and the night before, I said to God, well, how long does a marriage last anyhow? And I thought, well, that day I'd seen in the newspaper 2 cute little faces, and they'd been married. They were celebrating 60 years. So I said, well, God, I'll do the first 60 years. After that, you have to help. But he helped us all the way through. Jimmy wasn't an outward prayer, you know, but he had grown up mostly in the Catholics, and me too. And so we knew how to pray. And that's what we did, or even over the phone. So it helps, is all I'm saying. It helps to think prayer, to say it, to feel it in your heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, brave. Yeah, good one. Yep.
We lift up those who celebrate and rejoice, and also hold within our hearts all those who suffer or grieve. Let us join in silence for a moment, each in our own way, praying, meditating, reflecting into the quiet space. The hopes in this community are offered forth in the names of all those who have gone before, in the names of all those who will come after, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Shalom, salam, blessed be, and amen. And our reading this morning is from a transcript of a WINK news report on domestic abuse. It says, domestic violence can happen to anybody at any time. The mother of a former NFL football player, Zach Stacy's child, is seen being beaten by him in a video that went viral, and he's now facing aggravated battery and criminal mischief charges. The video is hard to watch, and it's drawn a lot of attention after it was posted to social media. People who work with domestic abuse survivors say that for most victims, it's not the first, second, or even the third time before they seek help. Many victims just take it, the beatings, the verbal abuse. I spoke to one survivor of domestic abuse today who was able to escape that violence. She saw the viral video, and she says that we need to see such videos to realize that what we see happens to countless men and women across the country, across the world, every single day. In case you've been hiding at the bottom of the ocean for the last 6 months, today is Super Bowl Sunday, and tomorrow is Valentine's Day. Now, for the record, I enjoy watching football, and I absolutely love love. But my concern with Valentine's Day is that if we're not careful, we risk turning love into a cliche. Real romantic love is deep, profound, and also complex. It can express the best in human nature, but if a person is badly wounded emotionally, love can express that woundedness as well. Meanwhile, to be honest, football is basically organized, stylized violence. Football players are no better or worse than other men, but if they're emotionally unhealthy, their treatment of lovers can be extremely hard to watch at best and downright dangerous at worst. So I've chosen today to talk about domestic abuse and domestic violence for the simple reason that there is never a good time to talk about domestic abuse, but it's crucial that we do talk about it. That Wink news report on fringe NFL player Zach Stacy's attack on his girlfriend in this area not too long ago reminds us what's important is not the graphic video and not so much that he's a former NFL player. It's that these sorts of attacks happen on one level or another every day. Domestic abuse can be as ancient as Roman Emperor Nero, who kicked to death his pregnant wife, Poppaea Sabina, or as recent as Zach Stacy or Northport, Florida's Brian Laundrie, who made national headlines when he strangled his girlfriend, Gabby Petito, last summer. That case first attracted my attention when I saw reports of their now infamous conversation with police in Moab, Utah, which is my old stomping grounds. Moab is a popular tourist destination in Utah. It's close to Canyonlands and Arches National Parks, and I hunted deer there as a young man in the mountains north of Moab. Laundrie and Petito had been taking a cross-country van trip when a witness spotted Laundrie hitting and chasing Petito in a Moab parking lot. Responding to that 911 call, police stopped them outside Canyonlands National Park. But by the time the conversation ended, the police went away convinced that she had attacked him. And that's not unusual. Abusers are experts at manipulation. They can convince onlookers and even their abused partner that the abuser is in fact the person being mistreated. Through most of history, even in our supposedly enlightened age, abusers still get a pretty free ride. The most respectable Roman historian Tacitus assured his readers that Nero had only kicked his pregnant wife to death, quote, by accident. Video of Zach Stacy's arrest for battery show that by the time they've talked for a few minutes, police officers are consoling Stacy, who's claiming that his girlfriend set him up. And that's hard to watch, but if you're not trained to spot abuse, abusers can be frighteningly convincing. Another notorious case, of course, is football player and movie and television star O.J. Simpson, who never paid the multi-million-dollar legal judgment against him for murdering his wife and a friend. He did serve 9 years for a non-related crime, but he now lives in a wealthy, gated community in Las Vegas, Nevada. With accrued interest, his legal debt to his victims' families is now more than $70 million. But under Nevada state law, his pension cannot be garnished. He has paid next to nothing on that court settlement. But between Social Security, his NFL pension, and his Screen Actors Guild pension, he is pulling down over $500,000 a year, all legally untouchable. For what it's worth, number cruncher supreme Nate Silver looked at the NFL's domestic abuse problem on his 538 Done Right statistical analysis website, and he notes that statistical crime rates among NFL players are below the national average in every category except for arrests for domestic violence. With that, they're measurably worse than the national average. Of course, the NFL has plenty of scandals. What is perhaps useful with Nate Silver's NFL domestic violence statistic is that it suggests that the relationship between a macho he-man mindset and the potential for physical abuse is all across our culture. Domestic abuse is a scourge everywhere, not just among athletes. Things have improved over the years, but the cases I just mentioned show that it's still not taken as seriously as it needs to be. Cell phones and security videos now document how horrific domestic assault can be, but unless there is a video, it's still a crapshoot whether the abuser will be held accountable, at least until it produces a dead body, as the nation witnessed with the Brian Laundrie Gabby Petito mess. Domestic abuse is a horrible and complex issue. Crucially, it's likely to be most horrible and complex for the person being abused. It happens everywhere to people in every ethnic group and every social class. It's very likely happening right now, very possibly to someone you know. It may even be happening to you. And if it is happening to you, or even if you think it's happening to someone you know, please understand three things. First, you're not crazy. Second, you don't have to be alone. Third, it's worth talking about it with a trusted advisor or maybe even your minister. This last is most important because one of the chief strategies that abusers employ is to isolate the victim. More than 25 years ago, I was working as an English teacher in the Republic of South Korea, and I met another American teacher there, a woman I'll call Mindy. She arrived when I'd already been there about a year. She was blonde, vivacious, and personable. And American teachers in Suwon were together all the time. We traveled to teach at government institutes and other teaching assignments together. We started hanging out together, and then Mindy and I began to date. I did notice that she could have a quick temper, but most of the time she was a lot of fun to be around. To make a long story extremely short, we were in an off and on relationship for about a year, and finally, still working in South Korea, we got married. On one level, I knew or should have known that it was a mistake when I did it. Mindy had told me about her family. Her father had been an alcoholic and extremely violent. She told me real nightmare stories about growing up. I knew she could get angry sometimes, but love really can be blind, and that's particularly true when you're 8,000 miles from home, lonely, and missing your own family. Besides, Mindy did have truly admirable qualities. She was a great teacher, she was disciplined yet caring, and very popular with her students. Together, we were the Institute's top 2 teachers, but I was more of an entertainer than a teacher, and I knew it. Students in my classes had fun and kind of learned English on the side. Mindy actually knew what she was doing, and she was so good at it, I would actually get nervous anytime we were assigned to team teach. Her techniques were so good, I would come away reminded of being the amateur that I actually was. When she wanted to be, Mindy was exquisitely charming and down to earth, as her father had been, her in-laws told me. She laughed easily, was a gifted conversationalist, and she could draw out the best in practically anyone. She was also genuinely principled. Living and working in one of the grittier parts of Suwon, she would literally stop and pull drunks out of gutters. One old alcoholic homeless man in particular would likely have died in the frigid winter of 1996-97 if Mindy hadn't kept buying him hamburgers and then a warm coat. She could be a real saint. then we would go home. And the apartment door would close. And the wonderful, saintly Mindy would vanish, and I would be alone with a different Mindy, one who hated everyone and hated herself most of all. She would rage about slights from other teachers and some of her students, how the Institute's director was cheating her, and how two-faced the secretary was. She could go into screaming rages for tiny reasons, always in private. If I seemed too friendly with another teacher, or if I didn't agree quickly enough when she talked about how someone had insulted her. And I argued back the first couple of times, but I quickly learned that was the worst thing I could do. You don't fight back if you know what's good for you. Fighting back guarantees worse punishment. Just ask Nicole Brown Simpson or Gabby Petito. I was lucky in one way, very lucky. Mindy was petite and too small to hit me. But it's also possible to beat somebody up with your mouth, and we shouldn't underestimate how much that can hurt. If I didn't back down, she would scream me out of the house or refuse to talk to me for days except to remind me how messed up I was. I don't like hurting you, Dennis, she would say, but you bring it on yourself, which is classic abusive rhetoric. The abuser makes you responsible for whatever negative emotion they're feeling. And then, after Mindy cooled down, she would tell me how much she loved me and would die without me. And that's the craziest piece of this roller coaster. I really did love her as well. The good moments could be so good, maybe even better because of the nightmare times. There's a level of intensity and excitement in an abusive relationship that can actually be addicting in its own right. I learned to walk on eggs, to always support her and never to argue. And then in the good moments, she could make me feel incredibly loved and appreciated. And we lived that way for a year. My body began to show physical symptoms of the stress. I felt as though I didn't dare tell anyone what was going on. Men aren't supposed to get themselves abused. Everyone who knew us thought Mindy was wonderful. She was smart, and she could seem so good-natured and easygoing. I felt as though if I did say anything to anyone, they'd tell me I was crazy. If you haven't been there, you cannot imagine how lonely and confusing it feels to live with an abusive person. You can't imagine the sense of mind warp that takes over. Believe me, studying the viral Moab, Utah police body cam video, I feel exactly where Gabby Petito was coming from. She's too confused to even explain to police what's going on in her own head, let alone explain her relationship with the boyfriend who hit her. The initial 911 call did report that he hit her. But if you watch that entire video, the police lecture her, give her a court summons, and then spend most of the time talking and joking with him. They were sympathizing with him 2 weeks before he strangled her and dumped her body on a Wyoming mountainside. Abusers are expert at making themselves out to be the person who's being mistreated, not least because that's what they themselves actually believe. Looking back, I feel real compassion for how afraid my wife, Mindy, was, most of all when she was in the middle of a screaming rage. The abuser is a very frightened person. They fear loss of control, and the mind warp is debilitating precisely because they are so convinced that you are the person who's mistreating them. In their mind, they're only doing what they have to do to keep you from harming them. And they are so convinced that you, the victim, buy into it. It's an amazing kind of craziness. To outsiders, The abuser often does seem capable, likable, respectable, often a pillar of community and church. The abused partner's confidence deserts them. Mine did. Everyone else seems to get along just fine with this person, just like the police talking to Gabby Petito's boyfriend. If you can't get along with them, you must be just as messed up as the abuser says you are. Again, I can tell you, the effect is incredibly isolating, disorienting, and disempowering. I'd already failed at one marriage in my life. I didn't want to fail at another if I could just love her enough. Maybe somehow it would work out. So I suffered along while my body continued to show the effects of the constant stress. And then I happened to mention some of this in a letter to an old friend back in the States, and the reply was, "You really put your foot in it this time, Dennis. You're in a mess, and you're just going to have to get yourself out of it." And that was the one pithy statement that I so desperately needed. A cold splash of reality from outside our crazy world. It made all the difference to me. It did take a while. One thing did have to lead to another. I hesitated a long time, but I finally did make the decision to escape. And I have never blamed Mindy. She was just doing her best to survive in the warped world she believed she saw. But she was not going to change, and I had to accept that I could not save her. I was consumed by guilt. I was paranoid. Even after I returned to the United States, I got an unlisted phone number because I was afraid Mindy or her relatives might send someone after me. I was still afraid to tell mutual acquaintances what had happened, and I missed her terribly. Ironically, the very intensity of an abusive relationship can be addictive. I was years getting over it. But looking back, my experience was pretty typical of abusive relationships. It was certainly educational. I believe I became a better minister because I went through it. And I also realized that I got off easy, real easy. Again, Mindy was small. She never harmed me physically. But had our genders or sizes been reversed, I have no doubt it would have gotten physical. Again, her father had been very violent, and while either gender can be abusive, make no mistake, women in straight abusive relationships are in more physical danger than men. For all the variables at that level, domestic abuse is a gender justice issue as well, something to remember this Galentine's Day. When I watch the body cam video of Moab, Utah police interacting with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, it breaks my heart. It's all too typical for so many reasons. What really makes my heart ache most is how desperately lonely she had to feel after the police left her alone with her abusive partner. There was a little too much male bonding there. Too much discomfort listening to a visibly upset woman. Again, to the eye that's not trained to spot abuse, it can look like precisely the opposite is going on. And that returns me to what was so instrumental for me, the importance of the reality check from outside the relationship. I can tell you from experience that what an abused partner most needs is a listening ear and an honest voice. Listen, be a friend, be trustworthy, and don't desert the person when witnessing feels uncomfortable. Oppression can take innumerable forms. The psychological damage of any oppression can be almost as extreme as the physical damage, precisely because the world does try so hard to tell oppressed people that their oppression is not real, or that it's their own fault. That is what the world does. Part of the religious life is to listen to uncomfortable voices. Sometimes we can even save a life by doing that. Amen. May it be so. And I invite you to stand as you're willing and able and close our service by singing our closing hymn, number 140, Hail the Glorious Golden City. And if you're not familiar with this one, it will sound real familiar. The chalice is extinguished. I invite you to respond, may its light go with us into the world. May its light go with us into the world. May we face the future not as a question which demands a single correct answer, but rather as a gift which asks only to be received and inhabited. The world awaits us. Our best is good enough. Tears and laughter are handy tools. Each person deserves to be challenged sometimes and loved always. As we go from this place, may the glow of love and enlightenment guide our way, and may the rhythm of our footsteps soothe and bless the earth so long as we walk upon it. Shalom, salam, blessed be, and amen.